Right up there, there's a wee pull on the bottom of the water pump. And you can see all the blue. It's leaking out of there, I'm fairly certain. So let's get that water pump out and get a new one in. So first thing I want to do is drain the radiator. In order to do that, there's a plug right underneath here, but to get to that, there's this plastic shroud in the way. So we're gonna pop that off first. There is a 12mm bolt right here. Then there is a clip right next to it. And then back here, there is another clip right up top here. With that out, the shroud should just pop down. And then right there is the drain plug for the radiator. Pop the radiator cap and let it drain faster. And while that's draining, I'm gonna get the intake cover off, this shroud, and then we can start taking radiator hoses off. I've seen a few videos on YouTube where people are replacing the water pumps without removing the radiator. I'm just gonna remove the radiator. It's gonna make it easier. This is the first time I've done this, so I'm gonna take the radiator out so I have more room. This is a brand new radiator as well, so I don't really want to damage it. Probably got less than 100 miles on it before the water pump went out. The reason the water pump went out, when I got this car, it had the green coolant in it, and after I replaced the radiator, foolishly I put the blue coolant in it, which is what was supposed to be in it as far as I believe. I'm pretty sure the coolant change wrecked the seal in the pump, so hopefully this solves that. And then it just pops into a little grommet right here. So there's just one bolt in this piece, this belt guard. I'm just gonna pop the bolt back into its hole here. In these two spots, we have some more of those push pins, pop pins, whatever you call them. This one's missing, but this one's here. So that's what they look like. And then this should just pop out. So these brackets just bolt on and they hold the radiator through this stud right here. This bushing just popped off. See, it should stay in this bracket like so. And again, I'm just gonna put this bolt back where it came from. It's less to keep track of. And I'm just gonna try to take this strap off. All right, on the driver's side, we're gonna unhook the coolant right here. And then there's also a transmission cooler line, oil cooler line right here. And that's just pinch clips. There we go. With the radiator removed, that gives us a lot more room. I tried cutting some corners there and it really backfired on me. I should have just took everything apart like it was supposed to. took the fan assembly off, then the radiator. I made such a mess with those ATF lines. These right here, these transmission oil cooler lines. It's all over the ground, probably all over my hair. So to remove these belts, removing this one seems pretty simple. There's a bolt under here that you loosen, and then this bolt right here will actually loosen up the tensioner, essentially. So then this one will just pop off. But this back belt here, it says to actually cut it. I don't want to do that. I want to reuse it. Even though in the shop manual, it says always use a new rear side belt. The videos that I watched on YouTube of people replacing these, they got by with reusing that belt. That belt looks like it runs the air conditioner. So if something goes wrong with that belt, I just don't have air conditioning. Might need to go get a bigger wrench. Maybe not. All right, that's loose. Well, that's loosening, but I don't see it actually moving anything. Yeah, that's working. Here we go. I've got a ratchet here with a 22 millimeter socket on it, and I'm going to rotate the engine clockwise and see if I can coax this belt off to the side. Might grab a hook or something so I don't get pinched. I'm going to use this hook. There we go. There we go. Now I need to knock the crank pulley off. I'm gonna try socket on impact here. My big impact won't fit in here, but the 3/8 one will. Yeah, chrome socket, impact, blah, blah, blah. Oh yeah, that did it. And look, the world didn't explode. There we go. Let's see if we can get the crank pulley off. Oh, that's not coming off. There it goes. Oh, dropped it. Dropped it and broke it. I guess we'll have to replace this. Next step is to remove all of these timing cover bolts. Now it feels like we're free. Looks like I'm gonna have to unplug the O2 sensors here. I can get to. So I threaded the bolt back into the crankshaft. I think there's a line on the belt we're supposed to line up. So I think this needs to come this way. Right there's one of the marks on the timing belt. Alright, that lines up there. Nope, but none. There's a mark on this, and there's a mark on this. None of that is lined up. So let's keep going and see if something lines up. Okay. Here, this timing mark on the belt is starting to come into alignment with this red mark here. Yep, they line up. And now let's line it up with the notch there. There we go. Okay, so the notch on the belt is lined up with the notch on the pulley, is lined up with the notch on the timing belt cover. This mark is lined up with, there's like a little indent on this pulley here. It's also lined up with, I think this is the cam position sensor back here, or the teeth for it. This is the sensor. That's lined up, and this mark is lined up with this timing mark on the belt as well. All right, it wants us to remove this pulley right here. I don't think I'm gonna replace this timing belt. This timing belt's only got 40,000 miles on it. This still feels fine too. All right. Here is our timing belt. Now this timing belt looks fine. I'll wipe it down, but we're gonna reinstall this. I'm gonna take this hydraulic tensioner off. Again, we're not gonna replace this. I do want it out of the way so we can work on the water pump. Plus, I believe we gotta compress this, and we have to get a pin through those two holes. So now it's out, now we can deal with that. So now the cam position sensor needs to be removed. Oh, that is unnecessarily tight. Whew, that ain't no 29 foot-pounds. There. So that little pin goes into that groove. Yep, the leak was definitely from the weep hole. These are plastic razor blades. I'm just gonna scrape off the crusties and the old gasket material here. There's not much, but there is some. this gasket gets put into this groove right here. And it just snaps down in there. There's nothing, no glue, no adhesive, it's just friction fit. And the new gasket for the water pump. This already has a rubbery coating on it. According to the instructions that came with the pump, you're not supposed to add any adhesives or liquid sealants to this gasket. So this gasket goes on like so, and then it's bolted to the car. So I've got the gasket on and 2 bolts just to index everything. I'm gonna try to start those 2 and then we'll add the rest. These get torqued to 8.9 foot-pounds, and it gives a particular sequence that we're supposed to follow. So A, B, C, D, E, F. We're going counterclockwise, tightening them down. 8.9 foot-pounds is about 107 inch-pounds. New thermostat. And the water pump kit came with a new gasket. These are also torqued to the same 8.9 foot-pounds. These are torqued to 18.1 foot-pounds. And now the timing belt cover goes on. This rubber piece has to slip behind the tensioner bracket and the water pump. These get torqued to 3.7 foot-pounds. Next is the camshaft pulley. This gets tightened to 57.5 foot-pounds. So to compress this, I'm going to use a C-clamp. So I recompressed it. This is a number 47 drill bit, and it fits in there. So now we'll remove compression. It is definitely bending that drill bit a little bit. Hopefully I can get that out of there. And this gets installed to 28.8 foot-pounds. The next step would be to install this idler right here, but I never ended up removing that. So now is the timing belt. The instructions say to make sure these cam gears have their marks at the top of their stroke, and they do. We fixed that one earlier. And it also says to have this mark here lined up with that mark there, and it is. So here's the arrows, and they're facing to the right. Here is a timing mark, and then there should be another timing mark, yep, right here. We got this idler gear that gets put down here. I saw a few suggestions online of using these paper binders to hold these belts in place, and I see why now. Because now that holds it on the mark that it should stay on. Next is to install this idler down here. I installed it before and realized you have to take it out to get the belt on. I didn't have the belt routed properly. Both of these get torqued to 28.8 foot-pounds. Now I'll remove these clips. So if we take a look there, on the passenger side, that mark lines up with the mark on the belt, lines up with the seam in the back. Here in the center, that notch on the gear there lines up with the dotted line on the belt. And on this side, this red line lines up with that notch up top. Now, this line doesn't quite line up between those two, and that has me slightly concerned. However, if I was to move it back one, it'd be off over on this side. So I just went back and reviewed the footage of when I took this apart, and there was a slight offset here on the alignment marks. And furthermore, if I was to move this back one tooth, well then that white mark would actually be way back here, which would be even farther off. And if I were to move it over here another tooth, well then it's going to be even farther off. So that white mark is within that tooth right there, so I'm gonna say that is correct. This one over here, that one actually lines up pretty well as well. Actually, that one's off to the right just slightly also. So I am fairly confident that the timing is correct on this. The next step is to remove the pin in our belt tensioner. Next step is to install the timing belt cover. I ended up purchasing a new harmonic balancer crank pulley because I dropped that other one. So the instructions say to lubricate this crank pulley bolt with engine oil before installing. So I'm just going to take a drop of oil off the dipstick. Good enough. And now we can install this. So the torque for this crank pulley is 34.7 foot-pounds, and then it wants another 60 degrees from there. So I've taken a socket here and I've made a mark at every vertex on the 6 points here. And that is actually 60 degrees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and tighten this down to the required torque. This is an automatic transmission and I need to be able to spin this, and it's just going to turn over the engine. So I actually found this scrap piece of metal that the hole pattern pretty much matches what's on the pulley here. So I've got some 5/16 bolts, and they kind of wedge in here at an angle, so they're actually pretty tight. And I'm hoping that's going to let me crank down on this. So I'm going to go to 35 foot-pounds. Well, that's not much at all. Right there's 35. But now it wants an extra 60 degrees. So to do that, I've got my socket here that had those marks on it. If I put a mark like this, where my wrench is right now, if I take this off and rotate it to the next set of flats, which is right there, and I make a mark. If I start my wrench right here and I end the wrench here, that is 60 degrees. So now we come up here and start pushing down. Oh man, that is gonna be tight. I'm about 2/3 of the way there. Yeah, I can't get that any tighter. Now it's time to install the V-belts. Got it. The alternator is supposed to be torqued to 18.4 foot-pounds. This is the air intake scoop. All right, moment of truth. Let's see if it starts. Well, it started. That's a good sign. Now, is it going to leak coolant? Those accessory belts look like they're tracking just fine. Some more coolant burning off the exhaust down there. I just crawled underneath. I don't see any obvious drips. It's been idling in the shop for 5 minutes now. I'm gonna pull it outside. The top rad hose is starting to get warm. So I'm gonna pull it outside, let it idle for a few minutes. Sounds like it's running just fine. Road test is probably gonna give me more confidence in that, but I'm feeling pretty good about that timing. So let's get it outside, let's let it warm up fully. I don't see any leaks, at least new leaks. Up here you can see all that. There's a pale blue, but that's all dried up now. Nothing around the thermostat housing. All right, I'm gonna call that a win. Before I take this out on a test drive, I'm gonna fluid film the bottom of the car. This will be done off camera. I lost quite a bit of transmission fluid doing that and other previous maintenance as well. So I'm gonna add some transmission fluid to it. The manual specifies this stuff right here or the Subaru branded stuff. I guess the Subaru branded stuff is this, but rebranded. So I'm not gonna tempt fate by mixing different types of transmission fluid. Manual says use this, so that's what I'm gonna do. I did take the car for a drive first and got it warm. And you can see it says 49 degrees Celsius, so it was sitting around 50 after my drive. So I just ran the transmission through all of the options: park, reverse, neutral, drive, and then I also did the manual second gear, first gear, and then went back through all of them. Now let's go ahead and check out the fluid level. And it looks like the fluid level is right between the cold mark, and this transmission is warmed up and it is hot. So we definitely do need to add some. I'm gonna go shift through again. That is really hard to tell where it is. To me, it kind of looks like right there. So it looks like we need to add twice what we just did. There, it's pretty much right underneath the full mark now, so I'm gonna call that a win. Well, there we go. I'm gonna kind of end the video here, fixing this Subaru Forester. I really wanted to like this car. I've had it for 4 years now. Something's always broken on it. So hopefully this is the end of the broken things. All right, let's go fix something else.